you still there?
I'm here. I was on mute.
Okay. Director Buchanan? Director Colson? Director DeWitt? Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Here.
Director McGallis?
Here.
We have a quorum of 6 present, 1 being on the phone and 2 absent. If the record would also show that Directors Durante, Frega, Fuentes, Higgins, Hobson, Ross, and Chairman Dillard are all also present.
Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes from the meeting held on May 25, 2017. Any questions or comments from anybody? If not, can we have a motion to approve? Motion by Director Melvin, second by Director Lewis. Roll call.
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Colson? Yes. Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Yes.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
6 ayes and 2 absent.
Thank you. Item 3A is a report on the monthly financial results for April 2017. B.
Joining me today is Eva De Laurentiis with our budget analyst group. Okay, so today we will be reviewing the Service Board's financial results through April 2017. Revenue continues to be significantly impacted by lower ridership, a tentative reduction in state funding for reduced fare programs, and the weakening sales tax. Although expenses continue to perform well, containing costs alone has not been enough to achieve a favorable net result for the region. So the size of the Chicago area labor force decreased by 15,400 in April, while the number of employed individuals in the region decreased by 5,400. The labor force contracted at a greater rate than jobs, resulting in an unemployment rate falling to 4.3% in April. So that's now on par with the national rate. Looking at system ridership through April, it was 3.3% lower than budget. As shown by the orange bars on this chart, ridership has been down each month from prior month, and total ridership has now decreased 4.9% from 2016. When you look at the summary table, each service board reported ridership results below budgeted levels. As indicated by the red boxes, Pace Suburban Service ridership was 7% unfavorable to budget, and ADA paratransit ridership was 7.6% unfavorable. The Suburban Service and ADA budgets both assumed ridership gains for 2017, but both services have thus far lost ridership on a year-over-year basis, with Pace down by 2.9% and ADA 6.1% lower through April. CTA ridership is also highlighted in red, with total ridership 3.3% unfavorable to budget, and both bus and rail ridership down relative to prior year. Looking at operating revenue, this was $10.7 million, or 3% unfavorable to budget, highlighted in red. The shortfall is due to the combined effect of unfavorable fare revenue and the lower level of reduced fare reimbursement currently appropriated in the incomplete state fiscal year 2017 budget. CTA has been most heavily impacted by the reduction in reduced fare funding, while Pace Suburban Service has the largest fare revenue shortfall due to lagging ridership. Both are highlighted in red. ADA paratransit operating revenue was 10.5% unfavorable, also highlighted, due to lower ridership and also state-delayed Medicaid reimbursements and lower reimbursements on RTA certification trips. Looking at the public funding, that shows a shortfall from the budget of 3.9% for the region, with unfavorable results for each service board, including Pace ADA. This includes our initial projection for March sales tax, which was flat to prior year. Real estate transfer tax receipts have also underperformed budget thus far by about 10%. The 2.9% ADA paratransit shortfall is due to, again, lower ADA paratransit funding. Instead of the 8.5, we're getting like 3.8 million. And also the stopgap budget. For state fiscal year 2016 and 2017. Looking at system-wide operating expenses, it's a bit of good news. Through April, they were $15.5 million, or 1.7 favorable to budget, with each service board reporting favorable results. Pace Suburban Service had a 4.6 favorable to budget expense performance, highlighted in light blue, primarily due to administration savings of $2 million. At the regional level, the favorable operating expenses were still not strong enough to offset the unfavorable operating revenue and public funding, so it's producing a net result that was $14 million unfavorable to budget, a deterioration of about $3 million from last month's report. Pace Suburban Service recorded a favorable net result due to its strong expense performance, while ADA Paratransit had an unfavorable result, highlighted in red, due to lower operating revenue and, again, state funding. Let's look at the recovery ratio. Through April, the recovery ratio is unfavorable to budget by 0.2 percentage points. This marks a significant improvement of 0.4 percentage points from the March results, when we found the region to not be in substantial accordance with the budget. The fare revenue recovery ratio of 34% includes passenger fare revenue only and is up 0.4 percentage points from last month's report. When ancillary service board revenue is included, the recovery ratio increases to 39.3 for the year-to-date through April, also an improvement from prior month. In the right section, we show the statutory recovery ratio of 46.9%, labeled with credits. Metro's recovery ratio continued to be favorable to budget, while CTA Pace and ADA Paratransit were each unfavorable, but by lesser amounts than in the first quarter results. CTA's operating revenue has also improved. In summary, the good news is that the regional recovery ratio appears to be on an improving trend, but it'll still be very tight for the year-end 50% requirement. So good expense performance over the rest of the year is key to this compliance. We continue to have growing concerns with ridership performance and its related impact on operating revenue, and even more concern with sales tax, PTF, and RET results. The dashboard shows almost a $20 million public funding shortfall through the first 4 months of the year. So that would project a shortfall that could be in excess of $50 million for the year. To keep that number in perspective, $50 million in funding variance represents only about 1.7% of our $3 billion regional operating expenses. We certainly have discussed slowing sales tax growth with the service boards, and we are meeting with them beginning Monday to start looking at reforecasting sales tax and PTF levels. But the individual service boards will have to continue to manage their 2017 expenses relative to lowering those new reforecasted revenues. The second quarter results to be presented in August would provide the next opportunity to assess the service boards and regional substantial accordance with the budget, although we will continue, of course, to present the May results at next month's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly it's not good news. I mean, the ridership is down. The state of Illinois delayed reimbursement is having an ongoing impact on us, as well as the cuts that they're making to a lot of our reimbursements. And certainly I think we anticipate probably even additional cuts coming out of Springfield. The only thing that's kept us afloat so far to where we're not having to make major cuts is really the fact that the service boards are doing a good job at controlling their expenses. They're doing it by not doing some of the projects they probably need to do. But without that, when you're looking at a $50 million shortfall, and we say, well, that's not a lot of money, when all of a sudden you ask the CTA to cut $25 million or whatever of their share of that 50, that's when you start running into some real problems. So I think at our next board meeting, by then, we should know pretty much, Mr. Chairman, what the state's going to do with the budget by then. And at least by August. But I think we'll have a good indication by the July meeting that whether there's any relief coming or not. And if not, I think we need to have some serious discussions on how we're going to continue to operate knowing what we know today in the future. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions pretty soon, no matter what the state does. Any questions or comments? Yes, Director Lewis.
B, I think I know the answer. I think you said it, but on the compliance ratio, is that measured one time per year, or is it measured on an ongoing basis?
It's interesting because we certify the recovery ratio results quarterly. But the language, we've looked into that, should we not be in compliance? It is on an annual basis. We need to meet it on an annual basis. Now, we budget the recovery ratio for seasonal variations. I think we covered that before, throughout the year. So we're tracking it to see how we're measuring up against it on a monthly basis. But certify quarterly to the state, and then the annual measurement is like that number that we saw at the audited report, our annual audit. That's the official number that gets reported, the 51.16 to the state for all of 2016.
And I think we covered this last meeting, but non-compliance with that triggers certain give-back. So that non-compliance, that give-back process would technically begin at the certification point, correct?
Correct. So sometime next year, middle of the year, when we're finalizing this. But again, the state owes us $470 million. So it's like, take it off our tab.
Yes, Director Melvin.
So it's the sales tax revenue that's off? Is that?
It's the sales tax revenue we projected after multiple valuations. I think we covered that too, but a 4% growth. And, it's also negotiated with the service boards, but it's coming in flat right now to last year. So we've got to readjust the 2016 base, and then we reforecast. But remember, the PTF is a matching, so that's affected too. The RET, there's sometimes these one-time sales. I mean, we're not selling, Willis Tower every year or the Skyway or whatever it is. But we base that projection on the city's projection. They give us their number, the city's budget office, and, they're pretty much on the mark, but even that's down. So we need something big to sell, and that because it was doing really well. RET has been doing very well, but this year it's not. It's under 10%.
And so do we capture the sales that happen electronically, like over the internet when people buy from Amazon?
Well, you know that there's pending legislation still on internet sales, and that's been going on for, I think, 10 years. We do capture brick and mortar store internet sales. So Macy's, internet sales. I mean, you capture that. Amazon now, because there's going to be a brick and mortar store. But other ones we do not capture. And then there's, of course, out-of-state sales, whether people are paying the use tax or not. I mean, it's self-reporting. You buy something, and unless it's shipped here, they're not collecting the use tax. So there's a lot of loss there in sales tax.
So, 10 years ago, the use of the internet was one thing, but today, at least from what I read, every day you pick up the paper and see that there's another mall closing or something going on. If that's true, and I just don't know much about those things, it would seem that it's more important than ever to begin to capture some of the internet sales because it seems like they're becoming significant, right? You see a lot of stores closing down.
And you know what? I worked on that before, and you're absolutely right. We're losing a lot. The challenge there is that they're looking for federal legislation that mandates internet sales uniform in reporting. So, for example, in the city of Chicago, we would lose sales tax because we collect a lot of other, self-rule type taxes. And so there was some evaluation done whether that would help or hurt. But in the end, it's a mixed bag. And what they're looking for is internet sales providers do not want to file 50 sales tax returns with 50 states. So they want to do one. It's almost like create one uniform sales tax, and then we'll pay everybody. So it's very challenging, and that's why it's been going on, I think, over 10 years. So we may get there at some point, but, I wouldn't bank on it right now.
But it's also nothing that we get to directly control.
Correct.
It's really managed through the state. And so we're sort of, while these, as been mentioned, conversations have occurred for years and continue to occur, it's sort of the state and the Department of Revenue that really gets to control that whole process and even potential for additional legislation to support that.
Director Hobson.
I know the answer to this, but I just want to get it on the minutes. So the service boards are aware that their ridership is down, that the state is late in payments, and that we are maxing out in terms of our borrowing capacity. so that there is a genuine issue here that needs to be addressed. I don't want to, 3 months from now, have the service boards come back. RTA, you didn't tell us anything. You didn't bring this up. So I just want to make sure that they are very clear that this is something that needs to be addressed immediately.
We speak all the time. We are having regular meetings. At the ED level, certainly, they're talking about this. Everybody is aware. Everybody knows they need to go into their contingency planning. They need to curtail their expenses. We're meeting on Monday again to actually start. We've already been doing the work on reforecasting. Our budget group does that. So it's really a matter of sitting down, okay, what's the plan? They have plans, but what are we going to do in the next 3 months? What are we going to do this month? And so forth. So none of this is news.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
I just want to point out, and Jeremy can chime in, but our borrowing bill is about to be sent to the governor. I think the legislature still physically has the bill, but it is passed, and it is paramount. And I'll tell you, Director Hobson, you could be helpful, since your state senator is one of the appropriations leaders in Springfield, in making sure. And I sent a letter that Jeremy and the staff prepared for me. A letter to Governor Rauner saying you need to sign this bill and you need to sign it expeditiously. And because of, and I think we cited some of the language from the rating agencies, it's even more important that he signs that bill and signs it quickly. I mean, if something were to happen or he were to make changes in that bill and we weren't able to get that, some approval until November, it would be, really stressful on mass transit in Chicagoland. So if you see your senator, I would urge her to tell the governor's office how critical it is that he approve that bill expeditiously, and it even became more important with the news from Wall Street last week. So she can be very helpful. So we need to get that thing signed and not have anything other than a straight approval on that legislation. And it is, and I hate to use this word, it is sort of pro forma now. It's sad, but it's not anything new. It's not anything that hasn't been approved before. And there was an amendment put on it in the House, but it is irrelevant. And they put it on all kinds of borrowing legislation. It's irrelevant to us. We are not going to go bankrupt. And we're very different than many entities. We're very fortunate to have assets. In fact, more than $100 billion worth of assets. So, the amendment put on by the House really has no meaning to us. They just put it on everything that was out there. And we need to get that bill approved by Governor Rauner as quickly as possible. But you just happen to have one of the key senators who can really help make sure that he signs that bill when he receives it from the legislature. And Jeremy and I, we carbon copied the Secretary of Transportation, the Chief of Staff of the Governor, and the Governor's transportation staff person. But we need to get that bill signed. I lay at night awake right now, worried about that bill, as well as what the legislature is going to do with our PTF funding in the future. They've already, I think, made an illegal and a terrible mistake cutting ADA funding for people with disabilities, because that's a federal civil rights. And I don't know how you cut funding for people with disabilities who need to get to their doctor's appointments, but I'm not in Springfield anymore.
Okay.
Director
Higgins?
Yes. One other item to add to Director Hobson's list of things to have in conversation with the service boards would be the budget projections for increased ridership in an environment where there's increased competition, low gas prices, contracting workforce. It's something we should probably think about for 2018.
Right. They certainly consider all of those things, but I think some of those have become an even greater factor. Telecommuting, things like that,
Thank you. No other questions? Okay, we'll go on to item 3B, which is the semi-annual report of project management oversight. B.
Yes, presenting the report will be our Director of the Project Management Oversight Office, Violet Groko-Gunka.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning.
Morning.
Today I'm happy to present the current report on project management oversight. We last presented on PMO in December 2016. You received the PMO report as part of the board briefing, and it includes details for every project. The report was designed to make it straightforward for our board to easily see progress, issues, and risks for the transit capital projects in the region. Please note this report was completed prior to the latest communication from IDOT regarding the impact on transit capital projects due to the lack of state budget. As Leanne referenced earlier, there are various impacts if the state doesn't pass a budget by July 1st. One of those impacts is the state's inability to access funding for state-funded transit capital projects, many of those included in this report. The PMO program currently includes oversight of all state-funded transit projects, regardless of budget, and all other projects with budgets of $10 million or more, regardless of funding source. Together, this set of projects for the current reporting period represents $3.5 billion. Please note that the state-funded projects in this report are part of prior year's capital programs. There has not been a capital bill passed in Illinois since 2009, and the intended level of funding has not been realized. As a bit of a background, RTA implements the PMO program pursuant to Section 2.01B of the RTA Act. RTA is required to oversee the Service Board's capital programs and expenditures. PMO is part of RTA's fulfillment of this requirement. Specific involvement includes direct reports and meetings with Service Board's project teams, attendance at other project meetings, project site visits, and periodic reporting to the Illinois Department of Transportation. RTA PMO staff is augmented by engineering and project management consultants who provide necessary expertise as well as additional staff resources. As of the current reporting period, all projects are on budget. If project delays caused solely by the lack of state funding are excluded, 95% of projects are on schedule. The one project that is behind schedule is the CTA rail car rehabilitation. However, if we include uncertainty of state capital funding as a cause of project delay, 10 more projects are behind schedule, making for more than half of our state-funded projects to have fallen behind. The projects on the next two slides are projects that were not active at the time when the state funding delays went into effect and were reported on hold in the last PMO report. Since then, the state of Illinois has notified the RTA and the service boards that the overall amount of the state bond program is being reduced. The service boards were asked to reduce their programs and to review and prioritize projects that will have significant progress toward completion made by the end of state fiscal year 2018. As a result of the reviews, the projects presented on this slide will be deferred and removed from the state bond program. These projects will be reevaluated for inclusion in future capital programs as other funding sources are identified. As part of the review of the projects in the state bond program, Metro had identified 2 projects that are shovel-ready and could be implemented quickly. These projects, UP North 11 East Side Bridges and Deering Bridge Repair, were previously on hold and could now proceed with a delay. They are currently in the procurement process. Metro had also added 2 new projects to the state bond program that are ready to proceed and could be implemented quickly. These projects would be part of Metro's ongoing programs in the locomotive and car rehabilitation. The change order amounts represent cumulative totals for the currently ongoing state-funded projects. 67% of the region projects are without change orders. The vast majority of extra costs for change orders has been for unforeseen conditions and added value to the project. The total cost of change orders represents less than 1% of the overall budget for the state-funded projects. For CTA, selected project highlights include 95th Terminal Station project, which remains on schedule and within budget. The project is advancing in design, bid, and construction activities. The South Terminal foundations are constructed, and the track adjacent to the South Terminal is being reconstructed. For Metra, the locomotive rehabilitation project is being completed as part of Metra's in-house rehab program. 7 locomotives have been completed, and work on 3 more is currently ongoing. PACE has been procuring additional fixed route buses. The 5-year contract allows flexibility for PACE to procure up to 460 buses. 322 buses have been ordered under this contract and placed in service. An order for additional 86 buses was placed in December. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. As far as the projects, most of them are on schedule except for the state impact of the lack of funding. So it's the same situation that we were looking at previously on how we're being impacted by lack of funding from the state. So any other questions or comments about the capital projects? Yes, Director Melvin.
About the $10 million change order, is that unforeseen conditions of $10 million?
This is a cumulative total, so it's not just one change order.
Okay.
Yes, so I think in the report, it's a total of change orders. I think there's like 9 for unforeseen conditions. Well, actually 15, so it spans over different projects.
So that doesn't seem out of line.
It doesn't seem out of line. It's not unusual for big projects to have unforeseen conditions. Usually those are for things that are underground, and when the projects are originally scoped, they're unable to be seen and forecasted, or things that are on a structure that you can't see when you're scoping the project originally. So it's not unusual to have unforeseen conditions, especially on big projects like 95th and Wilson.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you. Item 4A, the ordinance authorizing the quarterly capital amendment. Jill.
Good morning. I'm going to turn this over to Dave Spacek, our capital manager, to present the amendment.
Good morning, Chairman Nogales and members of the Finance Committee.
Good morning.
Presenting a brief overview of the ordinance to amend the RTA's capital program. This ordinance to amend the 2017-2021 capital program includes only changes for PACE with no changes for CTA and Metra. The total funding increase to the 2017 capital program is $1.24 million, and as a result of adding $1.24 million of federal CMAQ funds and the reallocation of $5 million of service board funds between 2 PACE projects in the current capital program. The proposed total funding for 2017 is increased from $1.744 billion to $1.745 billion. This amendment does not change the program's total funds and sources of revenue for the out years of the program. The program changes for PACE are, as I mentioned, the addition of $1.24 million of new federal CMAQ funds for the Randall Road transit infrastructure improvements and the reallocation of $5 million of service board funds from the purchase of new buses to the improvement and upgrade of PACE's enterprise business system. This reallocation was made possible by the state approving PACE's request to fund the new buses with remaining state bond funds. The state recently reactivated PACE's project to fund the new bus purchases with state bond funds, allowing PACE to reallocate service board funds from the bus purchase to the EBS system upgrade. Staff requests adoption of an ordinance amending the 2017-2021 capital program and incorporating the changes detailed in Schedule 2A and 2B of the capital program included in the ordinance. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? If not, could we have a motion and a second? Motion by Director Tarani, second by Director Melvin. Roll call.
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Colson? Yes. Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Yes.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
6 ayes and 2 absent.
Thank you. Item 4B is an ordinance authorizing the long-term borrowing the 2006A refunding. B.
Back to me. So the item that you have before you here requests the authority to go out and competitively issue refunding of the 2006 series with what we would call 2017 A series. Couple of key things to note. We are not increasing the amount. We are maintaining the same debt structure. We are maintaining the same maturity, 2035. It's the ability to reduce our borrowing costs, debt service over the life of the maturity of approximately $25 million. We will certainly go out and competitively issue, so we won't know that actual savings. And certainly this is something that because of the downgrade, we probably will save less than that now. But it is pretty routine. We've been advised to do this by our financial advisors, and we're coming to you to request approval to go out and do that, probably in the late July, early August range. So if there are any questions on that?
I have a comment on the goal is to save $20 million, and in the document, we have a minimum savings that we would consider still moving forward, which is 3% or $5 million. What is the cost of actually issuing this as far as, is that a net $5 million, or is that prior to?
That would be a net. Remember, we could pull this at any point in time. Okay, we don't have to go out and issue, and we don't anticipate, we anticipate saving more in that $20 to $25 million range. The cost of issuance, for example, in 2006, for that initial one was $1.7 million. Then there was an underwriter discount of $700 million. So, but we also bought a surety insurance at that time. So we'll also be setting aside a debt reserve as part of these proceeds for the 2017, because there are no insurances now that have the required high-level rating, so you can't get insurance for some of these issuances now. Our bond counsel is Dinsmore Scholl, and our financial advisors are Sycamore. I'll have to look at the total cost of issuance here. I don't have that with me. It'll depend also on what our final rate is, but I could certainly report.
I understand that, but
yeah.
your estimates were based on net anyway.
Correct,
So you'd
correct.
included, okay,
Correct.
so downside $5 million or $20 million, hopefully.
Yes.
Somebody had a question? Yes, Director Lewis.
You were touching on it, Mr. Chairman. So the investment banking fee, is it a discount that the bonds are issued, is out of the fees paid, or is it a specific fee?
The last time there was an underwriter discount of $700,000. There was the total cost of issuance was 1.7, and then the insurance was 1.1. I don't see bond counsel here the first time, but usually that's per thousand, and the financial advisor, as you remember, is per thousand. But I don't see what they paid in 2006.
Okay.
Completely.
The fact that we're going to probably delay this by a couple of months, we don't think there'll be any downward pressure on the rating, as
Yeah.
we talked about earlier. So, I mean, we're waiting for a couple of months probably because we're waiting for the markets to get right. But
No, actually, we've got to get 2 ratings for this particular issue, and we've got those meetings scheduled as soon as we're trying to schedule them as soon as we can, and it'll probably be right after the 4th of July in that second week of July. So that's the first thing. We've got to get those ratings. We don't go out with the POS, without the rating. So we've got to do that. And then there's something with the timing of the interest that they suggested you do it like at the beginning of a month. So it's got to, I'm looking at Director Melvin, but it's August 1st is what we're hoping for. So we're moving as quickly as we can. We're not waiting. And remember, one of the things we were told is that by doing the 2 notches now, that should the state be downgraded, we're okay. But we are having to get 2 other new ratings. We didn't ask for the Moody's rating. That just came to us. Okay. So we're actually requesting ratings for this issuance.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Director Melvin.
I think it's a great idea.
Great. That's it. hopefully we can generate some cost savings. Could I have a motion to approve? Motion by Director Lewis, second by Director Melvin. Roll call.
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Colson? Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Troyani?
Yes.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
6 ayes and 2 absent.
Thank you. Is there any other items that come before the committee? If not, could we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Director Tarani, second by Director Melvin. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Nays? Ayes have it. Committee's adjourned. Thank you.